Welcome back to Store University Lesson 6, Six-Shot Economics, or the 6 levers that business leaders have to create corporate value. I'm Chris Volk, CEO of Store Capital, and in the first part of this lesson we discussed the first 3 shots that business leaders have to create shareholder wealth. Now we're going to fire off the remaining 3 shots. Business leaders always take a look at cost control as a tool to create shareholder wealth, and that's the 4th shot. For growing businesses, a prime source of cost control lies in expense operating leverage, which was mentioned as a benefit of successful first shot, which was increasing sales. In other words, if you can take your existing overhead and then harness to capture more revenues, your relative costs will decline and your operating margin is going to increase, which will elevate your current pre-tax rate of return on equity and thus raise the value of your business. That said, the notion of cost control can loom largest in seasoned businesses and industries having less growth potential. Tools of cost control range from better staff scheduling to outsourcing to improved purchasing to improved energy efficiencies and frivolous waste control. Now, the first 4 shots are associated with profit and loss statements of the business, but the last 2 shots at shareholder wealth creation are associated with the balance sheet. Investment, as we are using it as a defined term, it refers to anything a company must buy and carry on its balance sheet that's funded with interest-bearing debt or shareholder equity, otherwise known as YAM, which is your own money. All businesses should seek to minimize this amount, keeping in mind that they also have to focus on the 4th shot, which is cost control, as well. For instance, a store or plant that is constructed for less is a great thing, but it may be less of a good thing if lower construction costs result in higher maintenance costs down the road. Likewise, it's better if a business can have its inventory funded by non-interest-bearing trade accounts payable, but possibly not at the expense of trade discounts or lower prices. Examples of investment control are numerous and include just-in-time inventory controls, manufacturer outsourcing, tight receivables control, and plant construction cost controls. All else equal, the fewer assets that have to be funded with shareholder equity or interest-bearing debt, the more the shareholders stand to make. Here I should digress to discuss research and development. R&D activities are absolutely an investment in the future, but they are, absent business combination accounting, not shown as a balance sheet asset. They are instead expensed. Depending on the extent of R&D costs, this can understate equity rates of return, assuming that you believe that R&D investments will have real value that's going to translate into future earnings growth. As you compute a V-formula, which is a financial and not an accounting tool, you might optionally include R&D costs as an investment. Or you could take a more conservative approach and show that R&D costs serve to compress operating margins and reduce shareholder equity returns. So the final shot of the gun is reducing a company's cost of capital. Cost of capital refers to the weighted cost of other people's money, or OPM, which we discussed in prior lessons, and shareholder equity, or your own money, YAM, which we also discussed. The idea is that by achieving the lowest cost of capital, the company will be worth more and existing shareholders will be the beneficiaries. The logic sounds circular, since a higher mix of debt will raise equity returns, and yet that higher mix of debt may increase corporate risk and thereby increase the cost of equity. This is why Franco Modigliani, the 1985 Nobel laureate in economics, essentially proposed that capital structures, or the apportionment between interest-bearing debt and shareholder equity, do not, under certain assumptions, matter to the cost of capital. Here, keep in mind that such constraining certain assumptions are far fewer in the 21st century. Today, capital costs can be lowered in so many ways. Diversified loan conduits, which are basically pools of loans sold to fixed income investors, can enable businesses to borrow at investment grade rates even though they may not otherwise be investment grade. This technology is essentially akin to the ability of the average American to obtain a low-cost home mortgage because of the diversity of the residential mortgage loan pools that those mortgages are in. The availability of tools like loan conduits or whole business securitizations is likely one reason that only about 7.5% of U.S. businesses in excess of $300 million in revenues even bother to have an investment-grade corporate credit rating. Likewise, preferred stocks, convertible debt, and convertible preferred securities are sophisticated forms of OPM, often delivered by investors having an ability to offer competitive capital pricing enabled by diversification. Corporate real estate locations can also be efficiently leased rather than owned. In fact, this is a service that Store Capital provides and which our leadership has been engaged in for over 25 years or more before we even founded Store. Leasing tends to have a higher cost than borrowing, but can actually lower capital costs because it enables deployment of less shareholder equity, since there's no need to commit equity to lower returning passive real estate. At the same time, leasing tends to free up cash flow because it has amongst the lowest payment constants available. As a reminder from an earlier Store University lesson, a payment constant is simply the payment divided into a loan or lease proceeds received. This is because real estate landlord is not expecting you to ever pay the proceeds back, but is instead willing to undertake the residual real estate valuation risk. Beyond this, real estate leasing can serve to deliver more financial flexibility, which is also highly important in determining your optimal capital stack. Capital stack. This is a term of art often used by bankers and financiers to denote the layers of OPM and YAM that you use to finance your company. Lowering your cost of capital and generating higher risk-adjusted returns on equity to increase shareholder wealth is what the 6 shot is all about. And there you have it, the 6 shots every business leader has to raise the value of their company. But we're not quite yet done. In our next lesson, we're going to discuss the need to be vigilant with your shots and the need to reload and fire again. Until then, I'm Chris Volk, thanking you for joining me on this value creation journey.